Good morning to all of you, and thank you for joining us this morning. We are pleased to have everyone here with us. I am Anton Thayalan, the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions, and I will be the voice of the webinar this morning. We welcome you to the new and improved Season 3 of Reset and Go, in continuation to Saturdays of Learning with Luminary. We present Revive and Thrive. As the saying goes, gear up to get your learning on. In today's segment of Revive and Thrive, we are discussing post-pandemic values, leadership's role in revival and growth, a conversational exchange of real experiences and validated ideas on which to leverage your success and truly thrive. My guest this morning, and we are truly honored to have these two fine gentlemen with us. We have Madu Rathnayake, Executive Vice President and CIO of Virtusa, and Dhananjaya Rajapaksha, CEO, Stretchline Private Limited. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, so thank you for your time on a Saturday morning. And I'm just going to sort of take you through a little bit of what I feel before we dive into the topic. So from what I've understood, we have gone through the most difficult period in our lifetime. And I guess that's saying a lot as Sri Lankans. Even with the 30-year war and everything else that has happened, I don't think we as a country or a society has ever been jolted like this in our lifetime, and as much as the lockdown for nearly 3 to 4 months. So having just come out of it, and during this time, of course, we have spoken about learning lessons, the new normal, and all of it. And we seem to have literally gone back to where we started off from all over again. So what did we learn? What were the key lessons? How are we incorporating that to change the organizations and its structures and its way of working for the future is what I want to sort of go into today. But just taking you back, I suppose, is if you really look at it, we are now staring at another possibility of a second lockdown. Other countries have gone through it, but we seem to be in a state of denial, saying that it won't happen, not really preparing for it. And nobody seems to be preparing for it. Because when it first hit Wuhan, as everyone very well knows, when it exploded in Wuhan and other countries were getting it, we didn't prepare. And I guess it's the first time, so fine with it. But having gone through it and seeing how it has affected other countries and a possibility go through the second lockdown, etc., we are still saying it won't happen. So my question to both of you this morning is, what are the contingencies we've made as businesses? What are the factors we have brought into play to say that here's what we will do in case if it happens? So what did we learn and what have we incorporated? So I'm talking risk mitigation, business contingency, etc. in the event we have another lockdown. Who wants to volunteer for this one?
Dhananjaya, you want to go?
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
So first, as Anton rightly said, it was the denial phase. So we as a company having some overseas operations, sister companies in different parts of the world, we came to reality pretty fast with the experience of other locations as well. So with that, I must say we got into it pretty early. But you're right. Now we went through 6 months. We did quite a bit of things in terms of getting ready for it. The first step, I should say, is that we started seeing what is need to have versus nice to have. I think we've gone through that in our personal lives as well. During the lockdown, we really understand what you really need versus what is nice to have. Same for the business. So with that understanding, we looked at so-called frills, what is really crucial and critical to the business, and started off with a list of things that we need to prepare to have the core business running. With that certain right sizing plans to bring in other things on the run if the things get better. So looking at several scenarios. So that's one, and then obviously the health and safety aspect of it when it comes to people's safety, which is our first priority. So the sanitization, the records and whatnot. So that's two aspects: business and people safety, and our corporate responsibility to keep it safe and keep it safe for others. So that's the starting point for us, actually.
Okay, thank you. Madu, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, Anton, if you take a step back and look, there are kind of a short-term shifts and some long-term shifts, right? If you look at the pandemic, what we brought into the context, right? I don't think it's nothing big new. These are all trends which were happening, and it was a moment of acceleration of some of these stuff, right? I see three things. One, there is a big awakening around going digital, right?
Sure.
And people are a lot more easy to do online learning, working from home, to online entertainment, education, banking. There is a huge awakening around digital side, right? People now understand you can do transactions, you can do work, you can do learning all on digital. So I think COVID had kind of accelerated that digital phase, which was slowly happening around the world anyway, right? So it's kind of overnight, this became a boost and accelerator, and everybody is now looking at digital, right? So that's, I think, first thing. The second thing trend I see is there is also a awakening or more heightened awareness around environmental impact businesses have, right? I think the first lockdown, if you can see, people start noticing what happens when people retract from work and cities, and how they started changing all the environmental, what environmentalists have been really shouting at their head all years around what is the impact of business on environment, became very clear and very apparent to most people, right? So there is a huge awareness around environmental impact businesses have, environmental impact of how you live, plastic, to a lot of the other things which are happening, fires, forest fires, floods. I think they all kind of people became a lot more aware, because while a lot of people were ignorant to a lot of this stuff, and they saw the impact of when you retract, just retracting from work for 1 month, 2 months, you could see the impact, right? The animals in cities and all that kind of stuff that we've seen, right? So that's a second kind of a awakening, I would like to call, kind of people become a lot more aware about the impact of environment. I think the third one is, as Dhananjaya is talking about as well, it is really a lot more of a personal awakening, right? People got a lot more, staying time at home, your relationships, your family, your health. A lot of people got a lot more, intensified their health focus. The way that, how many people have gone to doctors in the last maybe 5 months, right? And we would have run to doctors every other week for something or the other, right? And then here 5 months later, people are fine without rushing to the hospital for the slightest thing, right? So a lot of change there, I guess, and people have started growing stuff on their own, right? And there's a whole movement of people, what the hippies were doing for maybe generations, we are moving into that kind of a direction, right? Or personally, you're thinking differently about a lot of things about your life, right? You're kind of taking stock. So I think these are three trends I see which got accelerated because of COVID: the personal, the digital, and the environmental, and how the businesses needs to adapt is your question, right? In that context, what do you need to do to do a more of a short-term shift and a long-term shift, right? I think what's critical is what is your long-term shift as a business that you need to do, or as a person you need to do, right? And I think if these are the kind of a lasting trends that is getting accelerated, right? These are not new. I guess all this stuff are happening before. It's just got, accelerated very fast, right? For example, digital, everybody was going for, say, digital banking to digital retailer kind of stuff like that, but overnight kind of got accelerated, right? So I think as a organization, for us, we were anyway in this model, right? Our business is here and our customers are somewhere else, right? It's really nothing new in that sense for our type of business, because it's, we were anyway working in a very distributed global model, and people shifting home is really not so we didn't see a big impact from our business, but I see a big change in the way our customers businesses are changing as a result, how we should respond and how we support them and drive that transformation for them. Within us, I think, so the short term, working from home and those kind of stuff that's kind of impacting immediately, you need to start now, embrace that and adopt that, right? And if you think about, right, the distance between two people anywhere in the planet has overnight became same, right? I can talk to you today. I can, maybe after this call, I can talk to somebody in the US or Europe. And we could do all this before, but people are a lot more open to it, right? We wouldn't have done this webinar 5 months ago, 6 months ago, right? We would all want to gather to a meeting room or some conference hall and do that, right? Now online we shifted. So those things create tremendous opportunities, right? Now I don't have to visit customers, or our teams don't have to visit customers. You can, talk to 5 customers in an evening, right? As opposed to, if you had flown to US and spend 1 week and meeting, 3 people, right? So those things have dramatically changed, I think, right? And so your way of business has changed, and the way you lead has to also change significantly, I guess, right? What we've been calling, how do you move from a hierarchy to a hierarchy, right? Now it's all digital. How do you adapt to being more open to communication in different styles, different ways, right? So I think those are some of the changes that I see. And I think the important thing is to how does business embraces some of those, big shifts, those 3 things we talk about, right? And what do you need to do for your business to be able to embrace that change, right? And be relevant in that, so to speak, new normal, right?
Fair enough. Thank you, Madhu, for that. And thank you, Dhananjaya. So, you're absolutely right. There has been a shift, and it's across the board, not just to the IT industry per se, but across the board in terms of digital shift, the awareness and the personal. But we've always seen, and if you look at the traditional practice, organizations always do strategic planning. And you generally have your 3-year projections, you have your 5-year projections. But through all of this, and as you rightly brought out, one thing that we've seen above all else is the need for agile organizations, is the need for adaptive organizations. But in that sense, what elements, or which elements of adaptability and organizational resilience are we now bringing into the strategic planning when we get on with it? Can I throw that to Dhananjaya first, and then?
Okay, so let me first pick up from where Madhu left.
Sure.
The whole use of digital facilities and this whole digitalization has become so much more practical and embraced today. But from some parts of the economy and the sector, especially where we come from, we are in manufacturing. It's a huge shift to a lot of the people, even, and that's why I started talking about sanitization, all of the stuff, because we make products, right? As opposed to some of the service industry. So the shift is enormous in our industry, because when the shop floor work, working from home is a concept that is not fully practical in our environment. A lot of the management layers can practice it and are practicing it, but we need to get to people onto the floor to be able to make products. So that's one aspect, that there's a shift is a lot more than some of the other sectors of the economy. So in terms of adaptability, I think the first, or if I try to sort of club them under broad themes, first, I think, is the mindset of all people concerned throughout the organization. That the fact that there are many new ways of doing things. Now, for example, we are in the fashion industry, and in Sri Lanka, a lot of, substantial portion of our economy is dependent on this apparel industry, which is mostly related to fashion. And typically we used to send samples, the customers used to fit them, display them, all of that, and then products are tested for fit for use in physical form in most cases. And now that has to change to more digital forms, because travel is restricted, the courier is restricted. So that's one big shift to our industry, right? So we are now adapting the ways of working and adopting the digital tools much more in a much more accelerated rate. So the mindset is key, that these are possible. And also when it comes down in the organization to the factory floor, that the visibility of the people, or the management and the controls, the visibility is less. But then people need to adapt to the fact that you are doing your thing, and it's possible for some people to work from home while some others have to get to the workplace. So again, going back to my first thing, what is need to have versus nice to have, or let me rephrase it, what is the center stage versus the sideshow? Because in the olden days, we used to, when you get to the office or whatever your work environment, while you focus and talk about the center stage or the core business, you also, talk about a lot of other things, how so and so did, how, what happened in the environment, in the society and whatnot. But a lot of that is now sort of taken away from the workplace. Obviously, you have the social media and the stuff for that to be seen and kind of become visible. But your workplace, through these events, we are focusing on this event now, not really looking at what happens in the audience or whatever, because it's kind of irrelevant all of a sudden, right? Because we only see ourselves, and most of the audience is also at home. The sideshow is kind of taken away now. So that's I would say that's a big part, where people mindset and focusing on what is important, or what is in center stage for the business. So that is one. And then, of course, when it comes to business aspects, I think it is how do you plan to do more with less, which has again been a phenomenon in the business all along. But now the capex is tight, the funding is tight in the reduced business environment for some of us. So how do you leverage your other partners? It could be your overseas operations capacities that you might want to leverage. It might be your business partners, or sometimes even the competitors who are around. How do you leverage and work together? And then so that whole collaborative mindset, it's one. So as a second bucket, collaborate with your peers, collaborate with your customer, competitor. So that's bringing those benefits into the strategic planning aspect. And it's very timely as we speak. for a lot of the companies like us who are in the January to December financial year. We are right now in the budgeting stage, so we are looking at a lot of those things. And thirdly, of course, kind of having few predefined scenarios and to pick one on the fly, because when it hit the first round, we were all taken by a huge surprise. But now we know, okay, if the second wave is there, what is it going to look like? If it is like mild, like in Asia, what is it going to look like? If the customers get used to this new way of working and the demand comes back, how does it going to look like? So how is it going to look like? So we're having few predefined scenarios, and you can name it whatever the way you want, base case, and optimistic or a bull scenario, or pessimistic or a bear scenario, whatever. So few scenarios, and so that you are able to pick the variables and impact the levers almost on the fly. I think that's business-wise, that's the important part that we are focusing on as an organization.
Fair enough. Madhu, your thoughts on that, which is the kind of elements of adaptability and organizational resilience that organizations will now bring to the table when they plan, when they do their strategic planning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, we all talk about this VUCA world that we are in, right? Volatility, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity, right? And I think it's just hitting at the face of everybody, pretty clearly now, right? And it was just a good theory to talk about. Now, it's just at your doorstep, knocking on your door, right? How do you really embrace that? And I think if you look at the, building on what Dhananjaya was talking about, you need to be a lot more nimble and agile, right? In really, your planning horizons have shrunk from years to, months to, quarters, right? And really, you have to be a lot more attuned to what's going on, right? And you have to also understand a lot more how do you listen to the signals that you get from your partners, your employees, and so you need to be a lot more focused on being current, being relevant, being attuned to what is going on as a business as you plan. I think still the long range is important, right? And I think it's really hinged more on your purpose of the organization, right? And I think you really needs to, because you can't also work from quarter to quarter and be successful in the long range, right? You can probably navigate. I think these kind of scenarios even put a lot more focus on unearthing and finding your core purpose as an organization and what does it mean, and those kind of things help you galvanize your teams, your partners, and your stakeholders on the journey that you are on, right? So I think it's on the long range you need to be very clear about your purpose, your mission, and really be building towards that. And while on the short range, really being very agile and nimble and responding towards the changes that is unfolding in front of you. And that's how you probably need to adapt. Again, as I said earlier, there's nothing new, right? It's just really, it's getting amplified. It's getting, in the face of you now more than before. These are phenomenons, and these are the approaches that most companies are embracing slowly. You just now need to do it faster.
Fair enough. I mean, and you're right, Madhu, because right at the onset of this conversation, we also spoke about not just the organization per se, but we also need to look at it from the people aspect, and changing of that mindset is crucial. And you're right, some of these practices have been there in the past. So one such I can probably bring to the table now is working from home. Now, from a IT industry, I suppose working from home has been a practice. It's nothing new. Although, if you really look at what this pandemic has brought in, is that the working from home percentage increased. And on the flip side is that we've been made to understand very clearly that working from home has not proven to be as hunky-dory as initially imagined. And it was great at one point in time, but now with the pandemic, when it becomes a practice, individuals faced many challenges during this working from home scenario. On that note, how do we ensure that we are leveraging on the people lessons learned? Whether we are doing this because we have another lockdown, or we are doing it because that's the mindset shift that we need to adapt. So we're going to go ahead with it anyway, or because organizations have now learned to have a hybrid situation. Either way, how do we ensure that we mitigate some of those challenges that we face the first time around? Madu, can I
start with you on that? Yeah, I mean, I call it living at work, not working from home. Right? You're now 24/7 working, right? There's no boundaries. And I think there is. You're right. I think for IT and that service industry, probably disruption not is as much as a manufacturing or leisure or tourism. There's kind of devastation in some industries, right? So when I talk about this stuff, it's IT services which are probably these are becoming helping you amplify what you're trying to do before, right? So in some sense you are benefiting from people, the rest of the world realizing what you're trying to do. Sure. So I think coming back to your question about working from home. See, I think there is obviously pros and cons, right? And if I look at the pro side first, right, there is all of a sudden where you are became irrelevant to work, right? Your travel, obviously transport, all that stuff goes out of the window, and that same token, which country you are in also become irrelevant. Right?
Correct.
Today you can hire a person. I wouldn't have thought about hiring a person, some AI engineer from Bangladesh, just one guy, right? Or somebody from some African country or somewhere, right? So all of a sudden your mindset about access to talent, which is very geographically in the past, now all of a sudden become wide. I mean, this is not for every industry. I guess you can't do this in every industry. At least in services industry, it's become a huge thing, right? And this is again a acceleration of what's the gig economy, what was kind of building along the years, right? And people were doing gigs and come into an opportunity and do some work and move on to something else, and that's the millennials are kind of getting into that whole gig thing, right? And I think now corporations are embracing this a lot more and trying to access talent. So essentially, you get much broader, bigger pool of talent as you embrace more remote working from home. Gig economy and gig work is becoming really relevant, right? Some of the downsides are obviously, as Dhananjaya was saying, the water cooler conversation is gone away, right? And some of the ideas, some of the new thinking comes from those chance encounters that people meet, right, over a coffee or something, right? And so you need to figure out how do you drive innovation, for example, right? And how do you now create more scenarios for things like that? Maybe 2 days a week you come to office, 3 days a week you work from home, and trying to build that framework or use more digital stuff, bringing more social media stuff inside the company. There are technologies like Yammer, Facebook for work, and things which are giving you a social media within the boundaries of your enterprise, right? So you have a very similar ways of working, but within the boundaries of your team in a secure environment, right? So we need to see how you adapt to those kind of stuff, right? And I think these trends, again, it will also benefit from people who want to do part-time work, right? And think about a lot of the women workforce who are out of workforce because they chose to focus on raising a family, right? And as a result, maybe though they have time available, because it's not full time, they were out of workforce. Now you would probably find a lot of talented women who can really come back to work, maybe do half a day work a week or 2 days a week, because you can do it remotely, or even a lot more because you can now do whatever the other family priorities you have along with work. So there's a lot of positives in that sense, from access to talent, right? And then the flexibility that you as individuals get working from home and that scenario. Obviously, the stress levels have really increased, because not everybody is capable of doing that, right? Because you're a lot of anxiety about, you don't know what other people feel about your work. You don't know how the feedback loops are not as frequent. So it can also be very stressful for people, right? In terms of if you don't have the same level of interaction, the off the water cooler interaction, so to speak, right? So the balancing of those things become challenging, right? Not everybody has conducive environments at home to be able to work. If you have large families, small spaces, and all that kind of stuff come in the way. So there are challenges we have to overcome. Maybe it'll evolve into a more co-working spaces distributed in different places. So you don't have to go all the way, 2 hours travel, but you just go to, local co-working space, spend a few hours and come back home, right? Those kind of stuff will probably evolve as we embrace more working from home. I think there's a lot of positives. I think this trend is here to stay, at least in our industry. Is going to be accelerated, right? Most companies are talking about a 40, 50, 60% kind of a work from home on an ongoing basis, right? And sure. So that's what I think is going to happen in our
I guess you did bring out an interesting point, though. The working from home could also be co-working spaces, or even coffee shops for that matter, if that's something that an organization can come to an arrangement with, something that's centrally located, saves the time. I suppose that can also be considered. Fair point, Madhu. But that's from an IT and service industry. But Dhananjaya, how about the production side of things, manufacturing? Because I know for a fact that you can't have your factory workers work from home, and production line is out of the question. But for the rest of the workforce, is that something that we can learn from and apply as we go forward?
Oh, definitely, most certainly. Now, again, there's a lot of challenges at the beginning to adapt to it. Starting from, how do you set up to work from home? The very factors that Madhu mentioned, the space requirements, your workspace within the home. Now, I, for one, for example, I from where I sit in the organization, I can afford to work from home. But just a simple personal example, when we started, there were 3 of us trying to work from home. My daughter, who was getting ready for her final exam, and my wife, who was trying to teach from home to the students in her school, and also trying to learn this Microsoft Teams and all this stuff, and me trying to work from home to try and make contingency plans for the organization and all of that. So there's, how do you manage all these things? But I think learning from what happened, there are a few things that, few simple things that I can list. Getting the person ready to work from home. Simple instructions, simple education, like make your own workspace, get ready for work, even though you're at home, your timelines, like you're at home, but you have to understand that you're going to work now. I mean, this again would have been a practice especially in IT and the services industry, but it's pretty new to manufacturing. So some guidelines as to how you set up for work from home, how do you conduct work from home. So that's something that we've learned from the last round, to make people ready for that working from home. And then the mindset that you're not going to be always in the factory, but you are connected. You can get to work when necessary, even though at home. That whole mindset thing. And then, of course, one of the, though it's a technical factor, I think for a lot of the organizations who are not using the connectivity to that extent, one of the bigger challenges that we faced and we are still facing is that the actual connectivity to work from home, like the network, the Wi-Fi, this whole thing, which is a big challenge in our country, I think. So we have to now make it better for the people to have access to the company systems and the work groups and SharePoints and whatnot. And I believe that some of the industries were better prepared for it, especially the IT and maybe some of the service industry, but manufacturing was very, very less prepared for it when it hit the first round. But now we are working through that. Still, there are some challenges, but that is a key aspect to enable people and then to mitigate and make it better this round. So altogether, the people, again, the simple instructions to prepare, through people mindset, to infrastructure to work from home. And then that forms a bigger part in the second time around. Again, going back to a thing that was saying, the co-working space could be a good solution. I also agree, because a lot of the people who find it difficult to find the space, find the infrastructure, find the Wi-Fi, whatnot. And again, the discipline itself. Now, the thought process that if someone is working from, is he really at work or is he really doing something else? That whole social understanding or the workplace understanding is a big factor. Are you going to, your company provided infrastructure, maybe your dongle or your Wi-Fi router, is he still really using for work or not? So those little things are coming up in lower levels of the organization. So co-working spaces could be a good solution. And I think that's a brilliant thought process, and making people prepared for it, making people ready, especially in sectors where people were not so much used to do it before. So those are a few of the things that we can learn this time around, in my mind.
Fair point. I mean, I guess organizations do need to provide the infrastructure to support, to overcome the little hurdles or the challenges that go around working from home. Interestingly, earlier on, Dhananjaya, you mentioned about center stage, and you mentioned about predefined scenarios and right sizing. So, and I know Madu touched on it as well, where we look at now with all the focus is doing more with less, and that's the approach that organizations are taking. So they are restructuring, right sizing, as you rightly brought out, reducing the workforce. And it is understandable now that based on those approaches, that the same volume of work output possibly cannot continue. So organizations are now required, as you brought out earlier on, to sort of cull out the core activities, remove the non-value adding activities in order for them to survive and stay focused. So my question, I guess, to both of you gentlemen is, what should organizations be doing in order to ensure that they are very, very focused on the core activities and that they take out all the fluff so that they become truly more with less?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, there is this whole issue about are people fully productive? What we saw is in especially the first wave, obviously we saw there is a significant increase in productivity. because when people are locked down, either you're there's nothing else to do, so you're working, and then maybe when they start thinking, when the things start slowly opening up, that productivity, that high levels of productivity started kind of come down, and people get little fatigued as well from continuous work from home, right? I think the question about how do you increase productivity, they're certainly built into the whole concept of working from home, right? You're cutting out travel time, just simply, right? Half an hour, 1 hour in the morning, half an hour, 1 hour in the evening, all that stuff going away, right? And there is also a lot of the social aspect that happens at work, right? Non-productive, you can call it non-productive, or you can call it social, not to co-work, right? You might have some event at the office, you might have some, you do lots of other stuff other than just co-work, right? So those are going away. So you essentially already have a lot more hours in your hand to use for more productive work, right? And it's really about then how much of that can be really used for work, how much can be used for learning, how much can be used for the personal benefit of an individual, right? So I think, obviously, when you go to work from home kind of scenarios, you will have to do this. Again, I'm talking more from our industry perspective, right? You have to build this more on a trust model as opposed to being able to monitor and guide, right? I mean, look at the open source world, right? They build operating systems like Linux. People never meet each other. They work from all over the world, everywhere. It's built on a very different mindset and a philosophy of pride and the outcomes and all the kind of different focuses, right? And so the work in at least in these kind of spaces, software spaces will shift in that kind of models, right? You have to have more outcome driven. You have to have more. People will have other things to do, right? You can't expect the 9 to 5 type of paradigm working from home, right? You will have to go and drop your kid or do something in the middle of the day. You might have to go and do laundry or pick up your kid from somewhere. Those things will happen, right? I don't think you can say, hey, work from home means you get into a room in the morning at 9 o'clock and get out of the room at 6 o'clock, right? And that if you have that expectation, it'll be, I think you'll get a huge surprise, right? So how do you really embrace this now, right? And that will require, I think, huge change in the leadership approach, right? And how do you make sure that people stay engaged, people get true to their commitments, while also changing their whole paradigm of how they work and intersperse work and living together, right? And so I think it's a big shift, right? And you will have to connect with people a lot more. Again, you can connect with people a lot more now, right? Because if I want to have a chat with somebody in working in our office in US or India, just a Teams call away, right? So you do those kind of stuff a lot more to stay connected. So there is stuff that goes away from traditional work, and there's a new stuff that comes in, new possibilities for productivity comes in, and it depends on I think largely on your leadership style, right? Because you are not the standard construct of people come into a space to work, and that space is governed, and the space has a certain elements, rules, and practices that drives a level of productivity, and that is taken away. That has to be compensated with your different styles of leadership, different style of learning, training for people, so they also become more relevant, right? Because on the long run, if somebody works from home, doesn't become real productive, that will be also apparent, right? And then people will start losing jobs and so forth, right? So it's important that we also coach people how to embrace that effectively, and how the leaders drive that differently. So it's a shift, I guess, for sure, right? And I think I don't see there be dramatic productivity gains or losses. It's shifting into a different paradigm, right? You just have to make sure that you shift properly. If you don't shift properly, you will have serious issues. If you shift properly, I think you will see some benefits.
And I think you brought in some really, really valid points, and I will come back to you on that, Madhu. Dhananjaya, from your side, any thoughts in terms of how do we go about aligning the thoughts to focus on the core activities so that your actual efforts in restructuring and right sizing are not wasted?
Yeah, now again, from taking from what Madhu was pointing out earlier, there was a lot of fat, so to speak, in the organization, and there were certain level of unproductivity. And then we were able to quickly realize the gains in the first round, and people have seen it somewhat, and although you're not going back to the original levels of output, the absolute output, you have increased the relative output already as a result of the first round, and for our industry, the demands have also dipped somewhat. So you are doing fine right now wherever you were able to achieve that higher level of productivity from the first lockdown level. So, but again, I fully agree that the absolute productivity in the long run, maybe the initial fat you have taken away, and then you have some gains so far, but in the long run, it's not going to be overly different from what it is today. But it's important to identify that, the work to adapt to the new model. In that, one of the things that I see from the when you say the core activity and the fluff or center stage versus the sideshow, what is becoming more relevant is now how are you going to measure that outcome or the output more accurately than before, because in the organization where you were able to have that water cooler conversation, in more like in our environment in manufacturing, the corridor or the canteen conversations, because canteen is one place that where we meet a cross section of people in a manufacturing environment, from the top executives to the factory floor worker. You bump into each other and have a word or two, which gives you a sense of what's going on in the organization. Now that is lost, right, to a large extent for some of us. So while this new way of working is going on, how do you really measure the output or the outcome, the impact of a person's work on the results of the organization? So that's where I think as management, as leaders, we have to be very thoughtful and careful as to how you measure the core activity, and how do you make it visible to others. Because one of the good things is in this environment, with the sideshow somewhat being taken away, your personal preferences, the biases and all that also go away to an extent. Your true output will be visible. So how do we create that visibility across the organization as to the net outcome of a person's role? So it doesn't matter really, you take 1 hour in the middle and go for your shopping and attend to your kid or whatever, but as long as your output and the outcome and the impact, the positive impact that you're supposed to contribute is there. How do we measure that? How do we make it transparent and visible? And therefore, you really distinguish between the core activity and the fluff, so to speak, right? So that's one area that we really have to strengthen. And of course, not forgetting the fact that, coming back to the whole concept of a purpose of an organization, I think it's a very valid point that Madhu brought up earlier, because all of us have a purpose. The organization has a purpose, and to keep everyone together and march towards that purpose is the whole people angle. And it's challenged right now. Without those water cooler conversations, without those physical interactions, it's somewhat hampered right now. So how do we, while we are being very objective driven in terms of measuring the output and the outcome, how do we keep this interpersonal kind of touch and bringing everyone rallying around a purpose, and therefore the soft touch piece, how do we strengthen that as well? Maybe more communication tools. We have tried to implement, the Yammer and the basic social media tools to, SMS gateways to some of the factory floor people. So things like that, so that is another area while you are tightening, so to speak, the performance criteria. How do you enhance the soft touch with people, and therefore the ability to connect with them more emotionally and driving towards a bigger purpose? So I think those are the two things that we have to really balance in this new environment.
And I honestly think both Madhu and yourself have brought out some really, really valuable points when it comes to how do we drive this forward. So you're right. I mean, Madhu spoke about engagement. How do you keep that engagement level up? Madhu also sort of spoke about innovation, which is important because that's the era that we are in. That's the need. And all of that, including things like mindset, and Madhu rightly brought up about the leadership styles, which now need to evolve to adapt to the current situation. Now, all of this is crucial to ensure that we do stay focused on the core activities and leave the fluff out. I guess the big question on that is, while all of that is good to have and a must have, how do we orient and train our leaders and our staff to face up to all of this? Because clearly this is not going to happen instinctively. How do we make sure that we get them into that mindset? How do we orient and train them to get into action so that all of these suggestions that were just brought out by the two of you really get rolled out, implemented, and we can see the results?
Yeah, I think certainly there has to be a lot of training or coaching that needs to happen in organizations, right? It's a big shift. So you're right. I think there is a lot of that. I don't know whether people are thinking enough about that. It's just happening on its own. Some people are probably more good at it than the others. Some people are looking and learning from other leaders around you. And so as an individual, I think you need to take a lot of focus around, changing your style, learning some of this stuff, right? And, how do you, if you look at the communication, they say 35% of communication is verbal and 65% is non-verbal, right? And you're now cutting away a big part of that communication, right? Channel. So how do you really now become more effective communicator in those scenarios, right? And so, yeah, I think there is a huge gap in training, in really training people for the new normal, new work styles, how to have a different conversation. There's a lot of styles, ideas that people need to embrace to be able to work in this model, right? So I think there's a big opportunity for people to come up forward and build some of those capabilities, content, and deliver that training for companies. And in the meantime, you have to have your internal leaders to step up and make sure that they coach the rest of the team members to embrace that, right? And I'm sure they'll evolve. I mean, I've already started seeing some LinkedIn courses around, how to communicate on online meetings, and there's already coming up. A lot of this stuff are coming up, right? And
Correct.
so I think that there's a lot of content and a lot of channels will come up pretty fast to address that. And yeah, I think there's a big shift, right? So we'll have to coaching, training, mentoring, all that stuff has to come into, make sure that change happens effectively and that people doesn't kind of get disillusioned in that whole process of change.
Thank you. Dhananjaya, I know you also brought out earlier on about the mindset and innovation, and I want to sort of tap into that a little bit and tell me about your industry has also seen the need for that training or for that development. But what are your thoughts in orienting and training your staff to deliver on all those suggestions that you made earlier on, which is what the industry should see?
Yeah, so firstly, from an innovation angle, we have, as an industry, we have a long way to go. Some of the things which are more familiar in other areas, like Madu's industry, we are now getting really serious about digitalization and using digital tools and all that. So that training aspect, I think, is even more relevant in those areas, because we really have to train people in the new skills, using digital tools, interacting and collaborating with the customers across geographies using some of those digital tools. So training, in my context, I would think more in those areas. And then when it comes to the new order, the new environment, it is more of those coaching and mentoring in the leaderships. I think that is what is really key. Simply said, we have to walk the talk. Now we understand that this is real, this is going to stay for some time. As leaders, do we really disseminate that message, exposing your teams to that reality? Because again, that denial phase is not completely gone away. The denial phase still is a lot around. So how do you, even over-communicate, bombard them with some information and the real facts, saying it is going to stay. It is going to stay for 12 to 18 months. So let's get ready for it and mentally prepare them. And then, of course, at a lower level, obviously, you can make some work rules and, SOPs, whatever. But in the leadership level, middle to above, I think it's really the coaching. It could be in the moment coaching, like in 2 minutes, when you see something, or it could be a proper coaching, giving some constructive feedback, better conversations, so that we can bring in examples to correct their behavior, things like that. So mentoring, coaching is a big part of this whole leadership behavior and getting people ready. Because if the leaders are ready, leaders will walk the talk, I think the rest of the organization will fall in line.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I am mindful of the time. We are grateful that you gave us an hour of your time each on a Saturday morning. Before we wrap this up, can I ask each of you to take a minute to give us your final thoughts on post-pandemic values, but more importantly, the leadership's role in this revival and growth?
I think it's every adversity there is opportunity, right? I think this is really one of those things. As leaders, we have to start seeing what is the opportunity here. How do you navigate your organization through this and come out stronger, right? I'd like to use an analogy that used by the race car drivers, right? We talk about when you drive and you're trying to take a corner, normally what we do is we put brakes and slow down to stabilize, right? And the car, and then you take the car. That's what we do normally. But when a race car driver comes into a corner, they actually accelerate, right? And that's called drifting the car, and you accelerate and take the corner, so that when you come out of the curve faster than what you get into the curve, right? So it's, that's why you see the car goes into a drift and then come out of the corner, right? So that's exactly, I think, what we need to do as leaders, really look at and see how you drift the corner here, right? And how do you really understand what's going on and put in the accelerator as opposed to brakes, right? In this scenario, and really come out of the curve a lot stronger with a lot more momentum, and really navigate your organization, your teams to really take the corner as an opportunity to really accelerate your game.
Fantastic. Thank you for that beautiful metaphor. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Dhananjaya, sir, from your side?
Yeah, I think in similar lines, human race has survived a lot more things. We were, reading a lot of books like the Sapiens and things like that, the humankind, the history of the humankind. We have survived a lot more catastrophes in the past, so we are going to survive, and that's a fact. And then in this environment, what really matters is how do we keep that positive mindset and also getting to the reality fast, understand the context and get over it. really fast. I think that's key. So as faster we understand where we are, faster we recognize the possibilities and the need to move fast, like Madhu was saying. And then this is a thing that is not going to stay forever. And take the opportunity, be positive, and have faith in your team, your system, your co-workers, and we are going to get out of it victorious. I believe that.
And we are with you on that. And on that fine note of encouragement and motivation, thank you, Madhu, and thank you, Dhananjaya, for weighing in to this beautiful and delightful conversation. As we rightly heard, many leaders have shared that a key priority for them naturally has been the safety and well-being of their employees, and we've seen this. And indeed, there are many inspiring actions taken by both leaders in support of their employees. We have now come to recognize that this crisis will be around for a lot longer, as we rightly heard, and leaders are forced to define their approach for the long haul. Leaders are now expected to address higher level needs such as the want for truth, stability, authentic connections, growth, even, as we rightly heard from the beginning itself, the purpose of the organization. And all of this they need to keep in mind while staying focused on the purpose. How leaders approach this final phase in treating all the stakeholders will actually determine how the company will fare in the upcoming future and affect the ability of the organization to thrive while coming out of this crisis. On that note, I'd also like to thank H1, Sama Fernando and team for being our technology partners for the 3rd season running. Coming up in the next hour is This, That, and the Other, Season 2 with Varun. So do join in. They are discussing the good, the bad, and the ugly of controversial topics as usual, and today is no exception as they dissect disruptive HR practices, easier said than done. Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe, stay productive.